One thing, Shelley, is it's in that one, yeah.
Do you see what it's saying?
We'd like to call this meeting to order. It's good to see you all here today. This is the Weber County Commission meeting. This is the 9th day of April, 2019. Sorry we're a few minutes late, but we had a lot going this morning. Anyway, we want to welcome our former commissioner, Jan Logmaster, with us today. Good to have her here. You bet. I tell you to stand up and take a bow, but that's okay. You're amongst, I want you to know you're amongst friends, so that's good. It's good to have you here. Anyway, we're going to start this today with the invocation as a moment of silence, pledged by Christopher Crockett, and thought of the day by Commissioner Ford. So we'll have a moment of silence now. Very good. Mr. Crockett.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Commissioner Ford, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think was probably not the only person last night to watch on TV the Division I NCAA championship. Was I the only one?
No, I watched that.
Okay, good. Pretty good game, right?
Overtime.
Overtime. So that brought up a little bit of history, and of course you and I are at that age where we have some history.
I have no history.
Well, he has history, just not ancient history.
Yeah, that's true.
No known history.
So I kind of like trivia, and so thinking about basketball, there was a game played in Salt Lake, Division I championship actually, 40 years ago this year. 40 years ago, I think last night. Does anybody know who played in that game? It was in Salt Lake City, and the championship was between two basketball players. I think you'll recognize the name. Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. Remember that? Okay. I'm not the oldest one in the room. So it was Michigan State versus Indiana. Michigan State was Magic Johnson's team, who ended up winning. He had a great night. He had 24 points. Larry Bird went 7 for 21, didn't have quite as good a game. But really the key component of that game is you probably don't remember this, but the NBA was struggling through the 70s with this decreasing crowds. There was concerns of the history of the NBA through the mid-70s to the late 70s. And because of these two players, it really re-energized and brought the NBA to the forefront in the 1980s and what we see it today. So we can give a lot of credit to that game that happened to be in Salt Lake City at 40 years ago last night. And so in thinking about basketball, who comes to your mind as probably being the most notable coach in the history of NCAA basketball? John Wooden. Okay, see, I told you he had the history. So, John Wooden actually won 10 championships out of 12 years. 7 of those championships came in a row. 7 in a row, if you can believe that. If you look at the competition we see today, that's an unbelievable achievement. I happen to actually, well, let me mention this too, the 40-year 1979 game, I actually was able to attend that game. And so I was there in person. I think the only time I've ever attended an NCAA event, but the championship game. So that was a little bit of history. I also had the opportunity to meet John Wooden at the time, about that same period of time, early 80s. He had a granddaughter that went to Utah State. and is quite an individual. He was very unassuming. He looked at himself more as a teacher than a coach, even though he had such a great history. And one of the quotes that I remember him saying at that time, I'm going to tell you today, because he said this to a group of us who were meeting with him personally. He said, "Be more concerned with your character than your reputation, because your character is what you really are, while your reputation is merely what others think you are." So a great man, a little bit of basketball history. And I think that we learn a lot from sports and what we see taking place in our society today. That's my thought.
Thank you, Commissioner. That was a wonderful thought. Kind of makes me...
Appreciate your age.
Yeah, appreciate my... It doesn't make me appreciate me. It does allow you to go back and think about those things a little bit,
It
and
does.
what happened those days.
No, I think that's an important part.
You bet, I appreciate that. Well, we have some special presentations today. The very first one is the recognition of the 2019 Weber County and Ogden City Mothers of the Year. That's Susan DeYoung and Lisa Sheffield. Now, Commissioner Harvey, I'm going to turn this time over to you. What are you going to do with it?
I'm going to take that time, Commissioner, our Chair, and thank those who are here with them. I think the Mother of the Year organization is a wonderful organization, but I'd like to lob that. I'm going to just pass that right back to you, Mr. Chair, and ask that you take that.
Well, I was able to go to the meeting they had and make the presentation, and I have to admit, it was a lot of fun. It was fun to go there and see these wonderful ladies and their families, to be part of this organization. And Commissioner Zogmaster, you're here. Are you going to bring these people up and introduce them, or no?
I'm here for support, and that's it.
Support only. Well, then I guess I'll take over from here. Lisa, can you and Susan come up here? Well, so, it's interesting that these gals do what they do, and of course, there's lots of mothers that could be Mothers of the Year, but there's no question that these gals have some exceptional life experiences, and come on up here, you two, and it's really special that they're being recognized, and we've written to both of you. Thank you. Lisa, there's yours. And we want to congratulate you, and you can take a picture,
I am.
Shelley? That was all.
1, 2, 3, smile. Thank you.
Very good. We appreciate you very much and congratulate you on this, and I just think it's great. You bet. It was interesting when you go to this meeting, their families are there and they're talking about their history and what brought them to this point, and it's very inspiring to sit and listen to everything that you've done. And so we congratulate you and wish you well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
A lot of fun. We appreciate you very much. Thanks for coming. Commissioner Zogmaster, good having you here today, too. Well, you know it. Okay. Public comments. Are there those here today that have come to comment that want to scream and holler at us or anything else? Because right now's the time if you'd like to. You got 3 or 4 minutes apiece. Okay, nobody's standing up.
Why do you say scream or holler? They could be compliments,
That's true.
gushing.
When was the last time somebody come here and complimented you?
Well, we're making great changes, and maybe they could too.
That's true, maybe. Okay, next up, we asked the general manager of Weber Basin Water, Tage Flint, to come and make a report to us on water. We had one about 10 days ago from Lance Peterson in our WACOG. A lot's changed in 10 days. And we want to know, Tage, come on up and see if you can update us. We're getting ready to have a storm here in a couple hours.
We are.
And everybody tells us it's going to be a whopper.
That's what we understand. We just got an update from NOAA just in the last 4 hours, and looks like it's going up in intensity, not down. Really? Yeah.
So on March 21st, 1973, I was married. And out in little old Plain City, it snowed 42 inches.
Is that right?
Day. Yeah, in about a 24-hour period. And the power lines were down, and we were out of power for 7 days. And I'll never forget that. So these late spring storms, they always told us when we was in the legislature, Gage and I, that these are the ones you got to worry about.
Exactly. In fact, good point. It may have not snowed that much in March since you got married, by the way, but nonetheless, it's about 30 to 40% of our precipitation occurs in the springtime in this state, and we forget that sometimes and start worrying too early in the winter about our water supply. Well, thanks for having me. I have a few slides I can show you here to orient you with where we are in our water situation this year. And I will say to Commissioner Frower that I remember that game. I remember the game very well. I was just coming out of kindergarten. No, I wasn't. I'd like to think that was the case.
I was there. Yeah.
No, it made a big impression on me because the truth of it is I was playing high school basketball at the time, and that was a big deal at the time. So yeah, thanks for that memory. We just to orient you a little bit on the maps here. We are this is the service area of Weber Basin Water Conservancy District. We serve 5 counties in northern Utah, and you can see our service area there. A lot of folks along the Wasatch Front sometimes forget that we are serving a large area, including Morgan and Summit counties on the Wasatch Back and Ogden Valley on the Wasatch Back, on out to Wyoming. And that includes Park City over out to the south, and all the areas up through Camas and Oakley. All of those folks receive water from us in one form or another, and some of them multiple types of water. And then certainly along the Wasatch Front. This area in that map now is upwards of 680,000 people live in that map. That's where we are today. What's staggering about the projections coming out of the Gardner Institute out of Salt Lake is that that map will almost double in population by 2065. It's a staggering number to think about in terms of what we're going to do for transportation and certainly for water supply and other issues that come along with that kind of growth. We operate the reservoirs you see on the screen there. Willard Bay being our largest freshwater reservoir. A lot of folks are a little confused on what Willard Bay is. It's a freshwater reservoir that collects water from the Ogden and the Weber rivers after they come together down by 12th Street, and is our biggest reservoir. Willard Bay holds almost 2 Pine Views, to give you an idea. On the Ogden River, we have Causey Reservoir upstream, and then Pineview Reservoir, of course, down in Ogden Valley, and then Willard down at the end. On the Weber River, we have Smith and Morehouse Dam and Reservoir that's up above Oakley. That's our highest elevation reservoir that the district has built since the federal project, and supplies water to Summit County in those areas up there I was just mentioning. On the main stem of the Weber, we have Wanship, Rockport Reservoir, Wanship Dam, same place. On the main stem of the Weber, and then on the tributaries, we have East Canyon Reservoir and Lost Creek Reservoir that are all contributing to the water supply, mainly for the Wasatch Front. Here's our water supply outlook in terms of.
Hold on, you didn't list Echo there.
Yeah,
Good catch. So Echo Reservoir is the only reservoir on those 2 rivers that Weber Basin does not operate, and that's because it was the historic Weber River project that was built back in the 1930s, and is an irrigation-only reservoir and is operated by the Weber River Water Users Association. Now we have a big piece of that. We operate at this time of year for flood control, but the actual storage there belongs to that user group.
Okay. So, it's interesting. When I was a kid, well, of course, a long time before me, Plain City was one of these pioneer towns.
Right.
That ended up forming or being on the Wasatch Front. And so they had water rights in First Creek and 4 Mile Creek and all along the Wasatch Front And then they went over and actually had pioneer rights in the Ogden River, right over around that pond on 21st Street. Well, they gave up all those pioneer rights when Echo was built.
Right.
And so what that did was allowed water to be in the river for a longer period of time so they could irrigate. So they gave up all those pioneer rights and ended up being part of that Echo Dam.
Yep, exactly. So under the Utah State water right regime, a lot of those water rights were collected and then transferred up to Echo Reservoir location, and then that's what fills the reservoir. And you're exactly right, Commissioner. What that did was give them maybe 3 crops of hay instead of 2, as an example. Certainly water well beyond the peak,
Well,
or the runoff of the water.
Right, so if you're a row cropper, we used to raise potatoes, and so did Lynn Cottle, Wayne, and the Cottles, and many others out there would raise row crops. Well, you can't raise row crops if you can't get late season irrigation.
Exactly.
Because they just won't grow late into the year.
Right.
And they end up rotting in the soil.
Right, and the river's running naturally, running its natural course. We're almost done in terms of diversions by the end of June, 1st of July, somewhere in there.
So that's the difference. It turns that property out west and many of these other communities into row crops. So you can plant potatoes, onions, et cetera.
Exactly. These reservoirs then have added to that and also have that late season irrigation for agricultural purposes water supply coming from them as well. And that opened up even a wider range of late season agriculture along the Wasatch Front and the Wasatch Back both. In terms of water supply outlook, on the Ogden River in the upper left, there you can see what we're showing there, the average in the blue squares, what normally happens in storage during a typical year. And then in the red, you can see the 2018, so last year's storage. And you see the black line there is where we are presently. Now, keep in mind that we are actually keeping that a little lower, and I'll explain that here in a moment. A little lower than we could be right now because we're making some room for some heavier runoff than we anticipated just a couple months ago. On the Weber River, same scenario, where we're clear down where we were last year in a much lower snow year, but for purposes of making room for the runoff coming up. And then our storage down in Willard Bay is the lower middle one there, and you can see that's coming up. We have had a lot of water in the Ogden and Weber Rivers through the winter this year, in which we've put in Willard Bay. Couple things. We get lots of Monday morning quarterbacking on our flood control operations when the season's all done in June and looking back on it. But I can tell you it's a very difficult thing. We're putting a lot of factors into play this time of year. What the snowpack is an obvious one. On April 1st, we were over 130% on our snowpack, percent of normal. So we know we have a large snow storage component up there. The temperatures will really vary the flow rates coming out of the mountains. It gets really hot really fast. We'll get an entirely different runoff scenario than we will if it stays cool longer into the summer. Overall precipitation is a big player with the snowpack we have right now. Right now we're planning on routing that through with no problems for flooding going forward. But if it started to rain, like the storm we're about to get tonight, and it does that routinely every 3 or 4 days throughout the spring and early summer, that changes the scenario entirely. That's what happened in 2011. We didn't have that big a snowpack. What we had was a lot of rain in the springtime hitting that same snowpack. And the soil moisture has a lot to do with that too. We mark that throughout the drainage to know how much of that water is going to seep down into the soil and how much will run off into the rivers. And then timing of all that has all to do with that. So we're running models every day to try to see where we are. In terms of mean temperature, we were at the upper left there. That's where we were through December, and we were warmer than normal. You remember that warm fall we had. But it changed right around at the first of December, and since then till now, we've been much cooler, and we all probably have experienced that in every parking lot we've gotten out into. Same thing for 2018 on the precipitation. We had very little up there in the upper left. We were in a drought scenario for about the 5th straight year. And but you can see what's happened since December 1st. We've come completely out of that and swung the pendulum clear the other direction. Soil saturation, I talked about just a moment ago, that we do look at that a lot. Basin-wide, this is the one that we look at up in Morgan, which is a fairly good indicator for where we are on the Weber River drainage. The average there is in the green line. We kind of hovered around average on soil moisture content until we got through just the last few weeks when that's really bumped up. What that would point to is a little higher runoff than we would have expected just a few weeks ago because the soil's been saturated a little more. Snow water equivalent, this is on the upper Weber River. The green is the average, the black is where we are. And you can see there that we're much higher than average now on our snowpack. We are not in historic highs. You can see there's historic highs above that. And 1983 typically is the one that's up there on top, or 84, and you can see we're in high, probably the middle of the high numbers now in terms of snowpack presently. And it looks very much the same on the Ogden River. Echo Reservoir, as the Commissioner mentioned, is on the main stem of the Weber and a good indicator of after Chalk Creek comes into and just before Echo Creek comes into the river. This is just to show you where we are in forecasting. So the National Weather Service and the USGS and others showed back in Christmas time, you can see where they were showing for projected runoff at the end of the season. It was clear down below normal. Those are the average lines up there in the green. And we stayed projected lower than normal runoff until right at the end of February. That was the first time that they forecasted a higher than average forecast. So reservoir management gets tricky. We went 2/3 of the winter season thinking that the runoff is going to be lower than normal, and now it's shot up and projected to be higher than normal, and it happened just that fast. On the Ogden River, there's your snowpack. That's the Monte Cristo area on down to Ben Lomond, and you can see there it looks very much like the Weber, very high. And then Pineview infills, look at the difference of what we were projecting back in the end of February, below average, and where we are now in terms of what's projected to come out of those three stems of the Ogden River just above Pineview. And we're already seeing a higher runoff. We're up over 1,000 CFS coming from those three small rivers right now. Commissioner Frower probably sees that every day as he drives by. There you go. Hopefully it doesn't come right up to your back window. Yeah, and then if you take those same snowpacks and watch how they melt out, there are all the scenarios that we model. They could come out very quickly and with very little impact on the bottom, or it can continue to grow, the snowpack, and continue to grow clear into June, if we had the right type of a weather pattern. And you can see the difference, and we have to model all of those scenarios to make sure that we have a full water supply and not flood. Those are two conflicting type interests. Okay, so just to give you an idea, here's the Weber River and the Ogden River as they come down out of their respective drainages, and then end up flowing together. You can see Echoes where we were making some measurements, Pineview over on the Ogden River side. And here's our natural runoff scenario. The arrows are proportionate to the type of flow rates that we'll see during the runoff. You can see it starts low upstream. The Weber River gets much bigger than the Ogden, much quicker. And after the confluence, then it gets very large going down through West Weber and into the Great Salt Lake. And that's what you would expect in terms of proportional flow rates on those rivers. Okay, there's all our things that we're looking at: snowpack, forecast, spring weather, safe channel capacity. Ogden River has a safe channel capacity going down the canyon of about 1,600 CFS. That's our target, is to never exceed that, and except in exceptional flood scenarios do we ever get past that. And then how much space available do we have in our reservoirs, and all that goes into it. And then water rights. The Commissioner, you mentioned a minute ago the water rights that are held by those that farm out in the western part of Weber County. Yeah. Those water rights have to be met. We can't just store upstream and not have their water rights delivered. So here's just a quick and kind of a simplistic view where we are in Pineview Reservoir. So Pineview Reservoir we know is going to have a big runoff. There's the blue is our actual operations and where Pineview Reservoir has been throughout this year. And you can see back in late March, we leveled it right off. We've not raised Pineview since. And we leveled it off, and that's for purposes of now with that new forecasted runoff, making room for the reservoir. Now, if it starts to snow and rain extensively over the next few weeks, we actually might take that green line approach and drop Pineview even further before that big runoff hits and spikes way up to the top.
So, Tage, we've noticed just in the last week that the Ogden and Weaver are up.
Right. And that's largely because we're now, in order to keep that reservoir flat, we're passing over 1,000 CFS through the dam and down the rivers.
All right.
On just the Ogden, plus
Yeah.
what's coming down the Weaver.
Yeah, well, we've noticed that. In fact, in our meeting this morning, we had that discussion about how the river is pretty much full. the
Yeah,
Ogden.
it looks full. And in the Ogden River case, it's only 600 cubic feet per second from being at channel capacity. And by the
Yeah.
way, 1,600 looks like a torrent coming down that canyon.
Right.
There's no question about that.
1,000
1,000.
CFS?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
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 I judge it by what I call the flood rock right there. Just
Right.
You know what I'm
I
talking about.
know which one it is. Yep.
West of there. And
Yep.
It's about 3 inches from the top.
Right.
I get worried when I see it over the top.
Right. We judge it by how many fishermen show up at the mouth of the canyon after. No, we don't. I'm just kidding. The black line there shows the historical peak. About May 10th is, and it's plus or minus just a few days of that, is when the Ogden River generally peaks. And it's very unique where it's very predictable. So the yellow and the red lines are other scenarios where if it's ideal and we are able to run that nice and smooth through the reservoir, we would not fill the reservoir until about the 25th of May. That would be after the peak, so everything's manageable after that. If we turned off very dry after this week and got no rain at all, we might take that red line, which would take us to the 1st of June before we got it full, but just barely. And so we still run. Right now, I can tell you there's still a risk that we'll spill it too early and a risk that we won't fill it, even this late in the season. So that's what makes it tough. Okay, there you go, 30 to 40% of the runoff variability happens in the spring. We talked about our channel capacities and the fact that those two rivers combine below I-15. This is our diversion structure down on just off 12th Street, and just you can see I-15 there just west of the structure. This has been greatly enhanced over the last few years with a cooperative program and project with Weber County. And it couldn't have worked better in terms of flood control. We now have the capacity to bring water over to your right, just past that track hole you see there, into the Willard Canal at a higher rate because we now keep cleaner screens along that new diversion. And we don't plug it up as easily, so we can take more water and more pressure off the river, less flooding downstream here. The river gets slower and wider from this point down to the Great Salt Lake, and the flooding potential is much higher because just a few inches in elevation means a lot to those fields down west. And so
Tage, when did you fly this? How old of shot is this?
This is drone footage that we flew. I think it was 2 years ago.
Okay, thank you.
And so a little higher flows here, but nothing, of course, that we would see at the peak day.
So excuse me for just a minute,
Yeah, sure.
Tage. Commissioners, you're going to be given a copy of a fly that we did last Thursday.
Okay, good.
So it's
Oh, great.
coming to you. So we flew this last Thursday.
Great.
And you'll have that in a couple of days.
So it probably won't be quite this full looking at the time. So from this diversion structure, we can pass water through down the main channel, of course, and then you can see the Willard Canal now at the top of the screen. That has a 1,000 CFS capacity. We've concrete lined that portion that you can see, and we're working as every single year we take a section down and concrete line it. We're about halfway done to Willard Bay. It's a multi-year, almost a multi-decade project. Off to the left now, you can see the canal diversion that goes over to the Layton Canal and the Hooper Canal and others that divert over there by I-15 after it goes underneath the freeway. So lots of things happening at this one location. But the good news here is we're able to take more to the right than we used to offload some of that flood pressure that you see. Okay, I think that was my last slide. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Commissioners, either of you got questions?
I think I'm good. Let me just say one thing, Commissioner. You know, you guys do a great job. I look back, I see the reservoir just about every day, and I look back at last year when we had very little runoff, and I look at a river every day in my backyard, and the difference between what we have coming down the South Fork of the South Fork right now, I don't know the exact number, but I'll bet it's 10 times what it was this time last year.
Absolutely, yes.
And yet you were able to still fill the reservoir last year because of your flows that you preserved for future. And this
Right.
year you have exactly the opposite issue.
Yeah, exactly.
So
And we have engineers that scrutinize us every, you know, they live and die with this stuff all the time. One of them is your neighbor, Chris Hogue.
Chris Hogue, yeah.
Who's our main guy who's operating these systems, but he analyzes every morning what the scenarios are.
So, yeah, and people call me and they say, well, can we fill the reservoir? What's going to happen? I say, just leave it to Tage. Those guys will handle it. No, so that's out of our ballpark. But
That's right.
I guarantee you they'll do a great job. So, and
I always tell my staff, be sure you take the credit for the good years because I know who's going to get the blame in the bad years.
That's right.
That's right. Thanks for the compliment.
I just, Tage, last year, you and Scott Paxman, the others from your district, we met and did a day tour.
Yes.
It was fascinating how they keep things clean, how they keep the debris out of the rivers and the water, the tributaries feeding into that. Was a fascinating. Causey, Pine View, that area right there, as soon as you get off the Mountain Green exit coming in Weaver Canyon up to the right, was fascinating. But what I've talked most about is how you're taking some of that water late and storing it in underground aquifers so it doesn't evaporate. And I don't know that, I'd never even heard about that until I actually saw it in place there in South Weber.
Right.
It was just fascinating to store water underground in an aquifer. I thought, well, I'd know about these other ones that you showed at the beginning of the slide, but just great. And I appreciate learning and seeing everything that Weber Basin's doing to make sure that all of us have good, clean, healthy water to use every day, and we take it for granted, but I appreciate it every day.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate that. That is the one thing that we have to understand always, and you just pointed it out, is that the water supply exclusively comes from these two rivers. Whether the aquifers are being recharged from those rivers, or the surface water is being diverted for farms, or much of your drinking water comes from us as well as we wholesale that to your cities. All those sources are still all pointed right back at those headwaters and that snowpack on those two rivers. No question.
It's really great.
It is great. You know, it's interesting. Our rivers around here are different than they are back east. You get on some of these rivers back east, and literally it's 1,500 miles away. If they have a big winter, all of a sudden the people downstream start flooding. And you drive into those communities, many of them back east, and they'll have a telephone pole in the middle of a town. And they'll have arrows on that telephone pole showing the different heights the water's been to in the different years. And you start looking at those and then looking around and see how many of these houses are under those arrows, and you think, good night. Why do you guys still live here? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's amazing. We don't understand how good we have it here because we can control some of this. So, Tage, I do have one thing I wanted to ask you, and I think you were on that committee. When they're talking about damming the Bear River right now, that discussion's been going on for years, and I've been part of that. But now I'm gone. My last discussion, I wanted to know why we didn't build a Willard Bay 2 and take that water off of that to there, rather than the Washakie Dam that they're talking about. You actually have to pump water up to it. And it's a substantial difference just in the way it operates. But in the end, I was told last time by someone that they've decided that to get to a Willard Bay 2 or anything like it is not really feasible. Is that correct?
I think so. So yeah, let me give you just a quick update on the Bear River project. Under state law, this Bear River is to be developed upon the need for residents in Cache, Box Elder, Weber, Davis, and Salt Lake counties. right now, we have a water supply that is sufficient for our current population, and will have one going forward for some time. But if and when the project is required, then the state will have had some studies done as to where they should go, what direction they should go in developing that water. Originally, it was there were all sorts of sites for dams and reservoirs looked at. One of them was at Willard Bay too. One of them was actually an expanded Willard Bay right next door. The practicality of that is that in order to deal with that much new reservoir on that much lakeshore, estuary areas, and bird migratory paths and wetlands, is practically impossible to get done through the current environmental laws. And so that was shelved, and other reservoirs were looked at. Now, what's happened since you've left, Commissioner, is that the Washakie Dam site is likely not the one either, because of seismic problems, because you have to pump to it, like you said, all those things combined, and so they're kind of back to the drawing board, if you will, in terms of what they would do for storage. No question, if that project is ever built, it will require storage, much like these reservoirs are absolutely required to have a water supply for the time when we need it. The same thing applies to the Bear River. The runoff happens at the same time, and it'd have to be stored somewhere for it to be usable for a population, particularly for municipal water. So now the answer partly is when we need it, and we can say now we've kicked that can down the road some. Water conservation that you hear us talk about incessantly and probably obnoxiously to most is because if we get that per capita usage down, we can stretch our current water supply much further, and that's our intent. That's our #1 water supply project right now, is getting that per capita usage down. But in terms of the Bear River, storage will be required if they ever build it. It's not likely to be down on the lake shore because of all the environmental problems.
So it's environmental issues that keep us from being there.
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
Didn't realize
And some of that rightfully so. You know, you wouldn't want to destroy some of those natural systems.
So when you look at the Bear Lake, that's not a natural part of the Bear River. That's something that's man-made now, where we draw water off of the Bear River to put in there.
Right.
But that 20 feet or 22 or whatever it is on there, that's a massive storage. Can you relate that to, say, Willard Bay, the largest on there?
Boy, it's an order of magnitude bigger. I mean, it's over I think 40 times bigger than what Willard Bay would be. So it's a very large. And you're correct, by the way. It's operated largely.
Massive.
The top part is operated largely like a reservoir.
Right.
And the power company is controlling the inflow and outflow of that portion of the lake through the north end.
But the water users in Idaho and downstream own that, right?
Correct. It's largely under a very old contract now, but almost ironclad contract for irrigation users downstream of Bear Lake. The Bear River, the whole Bear River system is very complex. It's an interstate river. Starts in Utah, goes to Wyoming, goes to Idaho, goes back to Wyoming, back to Idaho, back to Utah, and into the Great Salt Lake. And then with that much travel through that many states, everything's going to be horribly complex as you move forward.
Well, it runs slow enough that people can pump off of it,
and they do.
And they do. Yeah, you're right. It's a massive. In fact, I was told at one time that 80-some-odd% of all the water that ends up in the Great Salt Lake comes out of the Bear. Would that be true?
It's very high. I'm not sure I remember the number, but I know it's over 50. Over half of it all comes from the Bear.
And of course, that all comes out of the Uintas, right? The north slope of the Uintas.
Yeah, and the Great Salt Lake, just in general, the Great Salt Lake is going to drive water policy in the future, in my opinion, where it becomes now one that's looked at for retention and for, sustaining the current levels, if not higher. I don't know anyone who's interested in drying it up, as sometimes is alleged. It will drive water policy in northern Utah.
Well, we sure could use more winters like we have now, so at least it gets back to an average.
There you go.
Yeah, I
Yep.
agree.
Yeah,
Thank you
exactly.
very much,
Thanks-
Gage.
thanks
We
for your time.
appreciate it. We
Thanks for
do
your time.
appreciate this presentation today. This is great. Well, so the next 10 days, if we get in trouble, can you let us know? When will you check again? When will you check again?
On our flows?
Flows and snow storage and
So we'll do a bigger analysis right after this storm is over, see where
Okay.
we are in all those charts again. If it looks somewhat different than what I show you, I'll get back to you.
Okay. That's really interesting. So, this would be a good time to give you guys notice. In our meeting this morning, my meeting with department heads, we were notified that there's a tree in the Ogden River that has fallen over in the river, and we need to remove it. Well, we've applied for a permit to operate in that river. The state controls it, the road, and we've applied for a permit there, and they haven't issued that yet. Well, now all of a sudden, in the last 7, 8, 9 days, since they've changed the water level, well, now the water level's high. Well, you know, the minute that tree moves, it'll go downstream until it lodges on something, and when it lodges, all of a sudden you got major issues. So I'm going to call them later today and see if we can get them off dead center. But if not, the next day or two, we're just going to go down and remove the tree because it's getting to a point where it's getting dangerous.
Where exactly is the tree?
So, right by Valhalla.
Sean, you better come up here and make this on the record. Since I brought it up on the record, it should be on the record. That's right.
It's not as accessible.
Yeah, it's right there by Valhalla. We can reach it from the road, but we have to basically stage in the road. So we'll have flaggers and we'll be safe in the area. But UDOT says they have to issue a permit, which has been applied for. We're just waiting on that, but we can't wait much longer. So
We're waiting for the permit from UDOT.
Right.
yes,
So that's the issue. But like I say, it's got to the point, I told them after another day or two, if we have to declare an emergency, we will. Because if that river goes up another few inches and that thing dislodges, we're in trouble.
Yeah. We should probably call Carlos.
Yeah,
Let
we
him
have to.
advise him right now.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very good. So we'll now go to the consent items on our agenda. The consent items are request for approval of warrants 1751 through 1753 and 438-154 through 438-315 in the amount of $805,000. I'm going to stop right there, Ricky, and have you do that because I always forget to come back to you. So why don't you go ahead and present those to us? And you can do the purchase orders at the same time in the amount of $338,798.
Fantastic. Thank you. I apologize. I arrived late. I was presenting to Lowman View Elementary fourth graders.
Good for you.
Fantastic.
You were not late at all. You're just on time.
Perfect. And I feel bad I missed Susan DeYoung's presentation. Congratulations. I claim her as a neighbor, so great. 24 purchase orders were issued this week for the amount of $339,000. The bulk of that, 71% or $241,000, is for our roads department. That will go to purchase chip and tack oil. 10% or $34,000 is for the Ogden Eccles Conference Center, and that will most of that will go towards the refinishing the theater floor, but also is purchasing some concessions. 6% or $20,000 is for the library, and that's for programming supplies for their summer reading program. 5% or $18,000 is for our recreation department, and that will primarily go towards repairs to the pavilion roof. As far as checks, we wrote 165 checks this week for $805,000. A third of that, or $269,000, it was corridor preservation funds, and that was mostly for 12th Street, but also some purchases out at 3300 South and 5500 South. 19% or $153,000 is for our fleet department, and that went to purchasing 2 trucks, a van, and an Explorer. 8% or $67,000 is for our RV park out at the fairgrounds to get the base down there. 6% or $47,000 is for the library, and that was a mix of building maintenance, some processing equipment, including RFID tags, and some utilities. And then 5% or $40,000 is for the jail. And that half of that amount was for the annual custody policy manual update. And then they had to buy some locks and do some building and equipment maintenance. And that's all we have for the money.
All right, so these corridor preservation projects, these are just WACOG funds.
Correct. We're a flow through.
Right. All right, very good. Questions? Either commissioner? That's the case. Okay, let me go to the next ones. That's true. So, item number 3 is approval of the minutes of April 2nd. Item number 4 is request for approval for ACH payment to the U.S. Bank in the amount of $160,336. Item number 5 is request for Weber County Fleet to surplus 2 Honda TRX 500 foreman ATVs and a 2012 Ford Transit van and a 2010 homemade trailer. Item number 6 is a request for Weber County Attorney's Office surplus office furniture. And item 7 is a request for approval of retirement between Weber County and the following individuals: Laverne Swenson and Troy Lund. Questions, commissioners?
Just for a motion?
I am, Commissioner. You're okay with that? Well, let me ask this. This ACH payment to U.S. Bank, what is that?
Those are that's the payment to the bank for our P-cards purchases.
Cards. Okay.
Yeah, you wouldn't know any. You wouldn't know.
Well, I try not to use mine. It never works.
You and me both.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I'd make a motion that we approve consent items G 1 through 7.
I'll second with a point of privilege.
Yeah.
When these retirement contracts come up, again, these are people who've worked for the county for a long time. Laverne Swenson did just a wonderful job. She is the one that would take the level 6 community service workers off of Kiesel and do a lot of the projects all over. All the cities benefited. We did as Weber County. Just did a fantastic job for years and years. Was a great asset. And of course, Troy Lund was at our roads department. Just a wonderful guy. Did a lot. He was one of the guys that were getting up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning while a lot of us were sleeping, make sure we had a place to drive, when the snow was heavy. And of course, he did a lot in the summer with lay down machines. A great operator. Really appreciate their service. With that, I just wanted to thank you.
You bet. All right, then, in mind, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Those are approved. So, I should mention in our meeting this morning with the department heads, I asked them when we would be done at Powder Mountain. Because, there's no snow down here, but up there, it still snows on a regular basis. And, of course, they're going to close the resort at the end of this week. And they told us that they'll probably finish, if they're lucky, somewhere right around the 1st of June.
Snowplow.
Yeah, snowplow. Because we still have to provide access to all those homes. So, and then, of course, they start by November. End of November, they're trying to get up there so they ski and everything wants to be open by Thanksgiving.
Just by point of information so people can know, when you say snowplow, what does the snowplow look like up there, Commissioner? You've been there and so you've seen, I know, but...
Beyond belief. You have to drive up and watch them operate this equipment to see what's happening. They have large snowplows, but that's to clean up after the snow blower. And that snow blower, it throws snow 60, 70 feet in every direction, and big augers, and they're doing this, and you can watch behind them as they go by, and the wind's blowing and it's drifting, and as he goes down the road, you look behind, and you can see that it's starting to drift in already. And he's only been gone by that spot for 10 minutes. It's really hard.
It's about the size of a locomotive with big augers on the front of it, and it's just really impressive. You don't, every day, just some of the stuff the county is involved in doing, water from start to end.
True. All right, action items. We have a request for approval of a contract by and between Weber County and Utah Division of Wildlife Resources for the rental of Weber County Chambers for the Regional Advisory Council meeting.
I'm not Shelley.
You are not Shelley. I can tell by the fact that there's no hair on
Yeah, that's
top of
right.
your
Yeah,
head.
that's right.
Go ahead, Sean.
Thank you. Commissioners, this is a contract, as you mentioned, with the Division of Wildlife Resources to host a meeting using the commission chambers that will take place tomorrow evening. The fee has been waived because they are a state agency, and they will provide their own security. This is a standard contract that we would have others use if they wanted to rent space in the Weber Center as well. Are there any questions?
Questions, Commissioners? Thanks, Sean.
May I bring up one other
Yes.
point? For contracts like this in the future, we will be approaching you to potentially give the authority to sign these contracts to me or to Bill Ross, and that's something that we can discuss, just so we don't have to bring all of these to the county commission. This is done in other departments in the county, so just a thought there.
Just so you know, it was the practice, Commissioners, if you do a fee ordinance, if to keep things in the open and transparent, anything that's away from the fee ordinance certainly ought to be brought here. But if it's a fee ordinance type thing, I wouldn't have any issue with that. Those are the contracts I think you're referring to.
Correct, with the library, the Golden Spike, the conference center, et cetera. Yep.
We can talk about that.
Yeah, something to be considered.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chair, if you're ready to accept, that we accept the contract by and between Weber County and the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources for the rental of the commission chambers for that Regional Advisory Council meeting held tomorrow here.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It's approved.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Sean. All right. Number 2, request for approval of contract by and between Weber County and Miss Rodeo Ogden to hold Miss Rodeo competition at the Golden Spike Event Center. Duncan Olson.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Yes, sir.
This contract is with us and Miss Rodeo Ogden, like you said. It is in trade for sponsorship. They come down and they use our arena during the or for practice for their competition later this year.
Questions, Commissioners?
Just a letter of it, or a comment of information. We have an agreement between us and Ogden City because the property underneath the Golden Spike Event Center is leased to Weber County by Ogden City, and one of the things we do is to help promote Pioneer Days, and so this helps satisfy that other part of the agreement, and that's why we do this.
Very good.
I'll make when you're ready.
Yeah, I'm ready.
I'll make a motion that we approve the contract by and between Weber County and the Ogden, Miss Rodeo Ogden, by the committee there to hold this event.
Second.
Very good. I have a motion and a second on H2. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and none opposed. That's unanimous. Next item, request for approval of contract between Weber County and the Utah Quarter Horse Association for quarter horse races on April 13th and 27th at the event center. Duncan?
Yeah, this one we're really excited about. Flat track horse racing is back. We actually stole this race from St. George. And so this contract is between us and the Utah Quarter Horse Racing Association. It's broken down to where we get a split of their tickets, but we're also a sponsor, so we've waived some fees, and we're going to end up having 2 days of racing as well as the naming rights. They've actually named the race after the Golden Spike, which is really exciting. I think they have about 100 horses entered for this Saturday. Come out and watch the races and have a beer and enjoy them.
Well, Duncan, I was out there Friday night, my wife and I. We were driving around. I said, let's go and see what's happening over at the Golden Spike. So I went in and I seen the bull sale that was going. We sat in there and watched sell these Angus bulls.
Right.
And there were lots of horses in the parking lot being run. And were these people just getting ready?
Yep, they were all out there training and practicing. With chariots coming to an end, they were able to get the gates on there, and so a lot of them have been doing the gate work. You know, that's a big, important part of the race is getting out of the gates healthy and clean, and so that's what they've been doing, a lot of gate work.
Very good.
I'd like to, one more thing. I want to make sure that the public's aware that horse racing in Utah, really what's happened is all the horse race tracks, it's all been consolidated pretty much to here in Weber County. We have a phenomenal track. It's maintained at the cost of private. We don't do a lot of work there. It's done mostly by private, so it's done with kind of an agreement. We have the property, but they do a lot of the work and maintain the cost and everything. Tom Close is a local businessman here, and he's now the president of the UQHRA. The state of Utah really wouldn't have horse racing if it wasn't for what Weber County is doing. And the fact that we now have 100 horses coming in from all over the western United States to run and participate in this, arguably some of the best races, and you get down to Southern California with Los Al and some of these others, the ones in New Mexico and even Texas, we are known up here in Weber County as being one of the great foundational places to get horses ready for some of the biggest quarter horse races in the country.
It's true.
Right here in Weber County. And I appreciate your work, Duncan, the work of the staff, the paddocks, the circles, everything that's been done. There's been a lot of volunteer donations and by corporations coming up. In fact, Gary Capp, in memorializing his father, Jake Capp, who was really involved in this, has a Jake Capp Futurity coming up where they've got thousands and thousands of dollars of added money that have been raised privately to help support these races. And it's really, by the time the races start and finish, it will be hundreds of thousands of dollars of private money, not taxpayer money, that helps support this sport and this event. And then what happens to the horses after that? Well, they turn into the great barrel horses and pleasure horses, and so down the line, we get to see the horses again with their owners paying fees and bringing economic impact back into our county. Tourism money that wouldn't normally be here. That same tourism money that helps pay property taxes every year into Weber County. So this is a fantastic foundational equine event, really for the whole western region of the United States, happening right here in Weber County. So I wanted to make that point. It's really phenomenal that right here in Weber County, not up in Box Elder or Davis or Salt Lake or Washington or Utah counties, we're really, really good at what we do, and this is one of them. And I wanted the public to know that this is one of those things that help bring a good rate of return into your property taxes by way of tourism dollars into the county. So with that, Mr. Chair, if you'll entertain a motion.
I'd be glad to have that.
I'd make a motion.
I kept waiting for it.
I'm sorry, I get a little long-winded. By and between Weber County and the UQHRA to hold these races on the 13th and 27th of April at the Golden Spike Event Center.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
I'll second that, but I feel a need to make a couple of comments or questions. So how many of these are local horses, Duncan?
So we have a couple trainers that are local, the Hadleys, and then Ron Mosman up in Morgan. He's not necessarily Weber County, but he is close. They have a large portion, but they come from Salt Lake, from Wyoming, from Idaho. They're coming from really all over. To Commissioner Harvey's point, our track it speaks for itself. We're going to get this big storm coming through, and we'll run on Saturday. It'll be ready to go, and it'll be a fair race. And as horse racing goes, that's what you want, is a fair race. And so we get them from kind of all over, but we have a big chunk here locally in Weber County.
That's great. And how much added money? You talked about hundreds of thousands. How much added money? Because that's what's important. I was involved with that sport at a time.
So I know I'm not for sure how much for this particular race, but I know about $100,000 has been added to the Utah Quarter Horse Racing Association.
Yeah. So with that, if about 100,000, that should bring in some quality horses, which means
absolutely,
which means that you will have people coming in from out of state spending their dollars here in restaurants, hotels, etc. And and I also echo the sentiments of Commissioner Harvey that that's a great track out there. And what we do see is exactly as he said. You'll see the race horses today, but you'll see barrel horses in the future. I happen to have a wife that did that exact thing. It was an expensive proposition getting to that barrel horse on the track, but it was well
Right.
worth it. So
Yeah,
anyway,
they're born for purposes, and they may start out as flat track racers, but they'll end up doing something else.
and it's great if we can encourage that, keep this up on a continuous basis, so we'd encourage more people to invest in horses, invest in our agricultural community here in Weber County. So
Correct. Yeah, we have these two races in April, and then we have our normal race that will be in May and June, and so we have 5 total race days this year, which is more than we've had the last several years.
It's great to see it come back.
And that was the
That was
second.
a second.
All right.
That was a long second
That was
with the long motion.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, all right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Now, I might mention something here myself now. So when I look through Plain City, I look at the Christophersons and Douglases and others in the community who race, and they put a lot of time and effort and money into these horses, So we've got a good, solid local presence. All right, number 4, request for approval of contract between Weber County and Spikers High School Rodeo for the hosting of Spikers Rodeo on April 18th and May 2nd. Duncan?
So with the Spikers, a couple weeks ago, we were supposed to host their rodeo. With the flare-up and concerns of the virus that came through, this is just rescheduling those dates to host that rodeo.
So when I went out there, they talked to those people. I just kind of mulled around a little. And they were talking about spraying down things, and cleaning them, and you've sanitized to a pretty good level that whole place out there now.
Yeah, we did. When that flared up, we had several events canceled just out of concern. Everybody invests so much time and money into these horses. They don't want them taken down by a little virus. So we went through and did our due diligences. We covered them, and we ended up shutting them down. We didn't take any layovers. We didn't have horses really around for a week or two, just to make sure that we kept that out of our facilities.
Great.
Mr. Chair, you ready for a motion?
Ready for a motion?
I would move to approve request for the contract by and between Weber County and the Spikers High School Rodeo, rescheduled to April 18, 2019 and May 2nd, 2019.
Very good.
Second.
And a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Commissioners.
So, hold on here a second, Duncan. So while I was out there the other day looking around at everything, your RV park on the north side, you start looking at all these trailers coming in, and my gosh, some of these trailers are just monstrous.
It's true.
You think they'll be 20 and 25 feet long, but now that they've got a living quarter in the front, some of these look like they're approaching 40 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, 36, 38 feet.
Big, yeah.
Yeah, and you put a big one-ton truck in front of them, and this guy started unloading one in front of us, and I sit there, and I told him why. I says to my wife, how many horses you thinking in there? She goes, 4 or 5. Well, I left where they pulled the 7th one out, and there was still 1 or 2 in there. I couldn't really tell. So they put a lot of horses in those trailers.
It's true.
So did you have something else going on out there? Why did the guy bring 7 or 8 horses?
So we actually had an SMB spring horse sale. So
Oh,
Friday was the
wholesale.
Angus sale, and then Saturday we had the horse sale. So we had both going. It was just Friday was the bulls and Saturday was the horses.
Wow. I'm telling you, that's an impressive, if you're don't have something to do one of these days, you want to just kick around and see what's happening. It's fun to go out and
We
watch
always
what's
have
happening.
something going on.
Yeah, there's something going there all the time.
Well,
Thanks.
and for those who garden, who have a garden, if you need shavings, pine shavings for your garden that might have some fertilizer in there, we'll load you up. Just bring
Yep.
a
Just
truck
bring
and
a
a tarp,
truck.
and
We got plenty.
we'll load you right up, and
Load you up, huh?
that's no charge.
Yep, free.
Fertilizer.
Well, it would be yes. I could get into the composition, but I think most people know what goes in shavings.
There you go.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Commissioner.
Duncan. We appreciate it. All right, finally, request on for approval of change order number 2 to Meridian Engineering contract to cover additional drainage designs as well as roadway designs and analysis. Mr. Gary Meyer.
Gentlemen,
So-
good to be before you today. Just a quick recap on what this covers is as we got into the design of 3300 South and we started speaking with residents on how they utilize their secondary water, their irrigation, tailwater ditches, it became clear to us that we needed to probably expand our design just a little bit to accommodate their tailwater and make sure that it won't affect our road in a negative way once we actually get construction dollars to build that. So that's essentially what it did. We asked them to do a little bit extra beyond the scope of what was initially planned.
And how much is this extension worth?
The total change order is $9,090. So.
Very good. Commissioners, questions?
No, motion to approve.
Second?
Okay, we have motion approved and second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thanks, guys.
There we go. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. We have a Stall of Fame recipient today. And I have
Everyone?
a key right here. Devron, you going to make this presentation?
I am. Thank you very much. Let me first just say thank you for this idea. I like this. There's not a lot we can do with our resources here to recognize our employees, so I appreciate the opportunity to recognize one of my employees, Steve Collier. He's a licensed land surveyor. He's been with us about a year. And I know typically this award goes to people who have had a long service with the county, but Steve's been exceptional for us, even though he's only been here a short time.
Is he here right now?
He is.
Right.
Well, why don't you have him come up here and stand
Come up,
next
Steve.
to you so we can see him. We kind of want to size him up.
This is Steve Collier. He's a licensed land surveyor and deputy surveyor in the county surveyor's office, and I nominated him for this position because of his work ethic and extreme ownership. There's not a project or an assignment that I've ever given Steve that I haven't had to follow up on. He has always taken care of everything I've asked him to do, and not just taking care of it, but he does it in a professional and efficient manner. And he has really added to our team and the quality of the service that we give out of the county surveyor's office. And Steve doesn't just do this for us and for the people of Weber County, but he also volunteers his time. He's a volunteer chair for the education committee for the Utah Council of Land Surveyors and runs a benefit auction for the students that are going to school for surveying in Utah. And so with all of that, I thought it would be a nice gesture to thank him for his work and nominate him for this Stall of Fame.
Thank you very much. Why don't we have a round of applause for Steve? So, Steve, come here. You can't leave.
Oh, I was missing that seat already.
Yeah, we want you to come on up here. So since the Stall of Fame gives you parking, we want to give you a key. So you put that car park on the yard, okay? We want to thank you and shake your hand. Thank you very much. We appreciate your employment for the county and what you do for us.
Thank you.
Thank you. I agree with you, Devron. This is fun to do this and gives us a chance to recognize our great employees once in a while. We've got great employees that work for the county, and we appreciate all their passion. All right. With that, commissioner comments. Either of you want to say anything?
Yeah, let me just, I talked to Commissioner Jenkins earlier. I think this is some information that may be worthwhile. So as probably members of the community know that Commissioner Harvey and a number of others started an economic development plan a number of months ago. And as part of that plan, we were able to request a good sum of money, $300,000 from the state that was awarded to GoEd. And there was some discussion as far as how those funds would be transferred to basically a Weber Davis Northern Utah Economic Development Plan that's been talked about and discussed over the past several months. Last evening I was able to meet with the GoEd department head and EDC Utah, who we were in discussions with for participating in this economic development program. and we came to a conclusion that that money will be forthcoming without an RFP, so we're successful in making sure that we have a clear path to have that money come back to Weber Davis. I met with Commissioner Stevenson in that meeting, and so I look forward to having a contract very soon for our approval and moving this forward. I'm excited what this could bring to not only Weber, but northern Utah as a whole, which Weber will be, in my opinion, be the big winner in this as we move forward, because we're on top of this and we're aggressively seeking economic development businesses in our county. So anyway, I wanted to give that information. There'll be more coming.
That's great news, Commissioner.
You bet.
And I appreciate your work. I mean, you've been absolutely not just passionate, but very effective in moving this forward. And it's just going to be better and better and better for Weber County, and the end results will be for all the people who pay property tax. It'll be fantastic for us, and it'll be a better quality of life. There'll be some wonderful things that turn out from this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we appreciate it, Gage. That was a big assignment you got right off the bat when you came in, and you're exercising it well. We appreciate what you do. Well, all I need is a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. We're adjourned. Thanks you for your attendance today, everybody. Good seeing you. And Mothers of the Year, you hung in all the way. Thank you.
That was nice of them.